Hi, welcome to Beyond the Boundary Road. I'm Jadine Croft, and with me is language researcher Des Crump, who's a member of the Gamilaroi tribe. Language is something many people take for granted, but little do they realize that it is in fact a cornerstone for progression and the existence of civilizations. And for our mobs, language played an integral role in their daily lives and for signifying their own nations. Following European settlement, many Aboriginal languages suffered a rapid decline in use, while others became extinct. For this segment, we look at ways to revitalize and sustain Aboriginal languages for the future. So thanks for joining us, Des. Can you just start off by telling us how many different languages are there in South East Queensland?
Thanks, Jadine. It's been estimated to be about 10 to 12 main languages in this southeast corner, and then there's all the dialects as well. So, for example, on this side of the river, we've got Turrbal as well as Jagera was spoken in this shared space. And so, as you head north, the Turrbal speakers also spoke Cubby Cubby, which is going up to the Sunshine Coast, and then Waka Waka going up to the South Burnett. Also over here, the Jagera people then spoke Yagara, and then going down towards Logan, the Yugambeh language as well. And then over on the islands in Moreton Bay, we also had Noogi and Jandawal as the main languages there. And again, there were different dialects there as well.
Okay. So how versatile are the languages between each of the different countries, and are there any different dialects in each of the different areas?
Oh, definitely, yes. So, for example, Yugambeh has 8 different dialects across their whole region. And so, for example, the Mununjali people out of Bay Desert, they also spoke the other 7 dialects of Yugambeh as well. And so, same as on the Moreton Bay Islands, they also spoke their own dialects and languages there, but they also spoke Gowanpur, which was a dialect on the coastline around the Redlands going up towards Wynnum area as well. So they're very versatile, and in traditional times our old people spoke their own language but also the neighbouring languages, so they're very multilingual.
What's the relationship between language and identity, and what role does it play in the times we're in now?
I think it's very important because it's that connection back to the country that you belong. It's also the language of the country that you're from as well. So it's important for young people especially to understand who they are, and part of being who they are is what language group they belong to, which part of the country they belong to as well.
So what's the traditional ways to sustain our language?
Well, in traditional times, our languages were very much an oral-based language, so it was passed on from one generation to the next, basically by yarning, storytelling, learning from our old people. Today, we try to capture some of that traditional learning into our language revival, where we want our young people to learn how to say the words properly, how to listen and speak those words before we start, I guess, sharing that the writing part of our language.
What impact did the Protection Act have on the language identity of Queensland's First People?
Well, the Protection Act was very devastating for our language and culture. It meant that our old people weren't allowed to speak the language and practice their culture, and so it led to for a lot of people a break in that language and cultural cycle. So there's a whole generation that weren't allowed to speak, and so that's why it's equally important today for the young people and people of my generation to try and go back that generation to what the language was like before it was lost.
And what is the revitalization of language? What has that meant to reconciliation?
Well, it's part of that shared history of our country. So reconciliation is about understanding and respecting all the languages and cultures of Australia, and so part of that is also understanding and respecting all the languages that Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islander people spoke in Australia as well.
Yeah. Are there many organisations out there working to revitalise Aboriginal language?
Oh, certainly, yeah. I work with the State Library of Queensland as a language researcher, but I also work with Yugambeh, which is a language centre based down at Beenleigh. So there's 5 language centres to support communities across Queensland, and then there's also the community groups as well, and people like local housing co-ops, Aboriginal organisations, museums, all of those groups are working together to revive the local languages.
So what are the challenges in revitalising these languages?
Well, the biggest challenge is not having the speakers available. Like in traditional times, everybody spoke that language. Today, there may only be a handful who know some of the language. So it's important that we sit down with those old people that know the language, record them, document their language knowledge, research the other sources that are available either through the Institute of Aboriginal Studies in Canberra or State Library, University of Queensland, all those other organisations that have collected materials about our language, and then putting all that together so that we've got community knowledge plus the written knowledge to create what the language is like for our people.
So to cap off today's segment, how do you say greetings in your language?
Well, there's a couple of ways of saying hello in my language, Gamilaroi. If it was a casual situation, I'd just say Yama, but if it was a more formal setting, or if I was talking to someone that I needed to show respect to, like an elder, I would say Yamagara. So it's a difference between saying hi and the difference to saying hello, how are you?
Okay, so that's Yama.
Yama.
Yama. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much, Des, for coming and teaching us about language revitalization. It's always important to take reconciliation into consideration. Next week, we'll be learning about the relationship between language and music. So stay with us for Beyond the Boundary Road after the break.